Welcome to what I am going to call the weekend edition of Sex in the News for the weekend of June 28th and 29th. I'm going to start the Sex in the News out by recapping for you all where I have been for the last few days. So Wednesday, I flew down to Franklin, Tennessee to be part of the first annual conference sponsored by LitPath, which is a nonprofit organization that provides treatment scholarships for people dealing with sexual compulsivity or problematic sexual behavior. And they did this conference in part as sort of their inaugural Sexual Addiction Awareness Week. There was no such thing. And they pretty much just said, hey, let's do this. Let's create a sexual addiction awareness week to try to bring to light the struggles that many people have with compulsive sexual behavior disorder. For many people, that's problematic pornography use and things like that. So when I was down there, it was a lot about prevention and a lot of really great folks getting together and talking about not just treatment, but things that we can do for education. And it inspired me to get back on track in terms of talking about sex in the news, which ultimately my goal for this is to just kind of bring awareness to folks as to what is going on. A tidbit about this conference: it was the first one that I have ever experienced in my life where it brought together both therapists and individuals that were struggling with sexual compulsivity as well as their partners. So there were multiple tracks. There were clinical tracks for the therapists. I presented there in the clinical track. And then there's also tracks sort of specifically for individuals going through the struggle. And it was actually, from a therapist perspective, an incredibly amazing thing to experience, to have folks in the room. We weren't othering them. Normally when you're at like a mental health conference, you're talking about the patients or the clients, and we're kind of talking about the folks that we work with in this very disconnected way. And to do these kind of talks with folks in the room who were going through the struggle was actually really connecting. And I just felt really excited to be part of something that was different and something that was very new. And talking to the coordinators of the conference, apparently that folks were kind of like, you can't do that, you can't put therapists and people struggling with addiction in the same conference. And oh yes, they can. And they did it very well. And again, this was the first year that they did this conference, and hopefully it will continue, because it was just a wonderful experience and it will just continue to get bigger. And I will put the link to LitPath, a nonprofit organization, in the comments, in the video. But also, in my brain, I'm thinking, what can I do to kind of also bring awareness to this, which is partly why I do these videos. And then we're going to think about some things to do next year during Sex Addiction Awareness Week for our general public, where I am in Pennsylvania. The first bit of news that came to my attention this week was in the New York Times. And I guess this is technically from Friday, but I was traveling yesterday back from the conference, so came across this. And its title is "Authorities Rescue Girl Whose Mother Live Streamed Her Sexual Abuse." And for me, this is a horrible news, egregious news, good news kind of article. And so the crux of the matter is that a woman in extremely rural and extremely poor part of Vietnam had been going online to all of these places where people can go online, and fundamentally selling videos or creating bespoke videos of her sexually abusing her child. And so obviously that is one of the horrible, egregious pieces of this, is that, it really brings to light the fact that there are absolutely these online marketplaces where people can, go and request videos, or where people are selling videos where they are sexually abusing their children. And so it's unfortunate, that's not even a good enough word, it's a horrible reality, right, that this happens. And it's a thing that people don't really think about. I think we talk about in our world that, like, once you can't unknow, and a lot of people don't think about these things, is that, you can go on the web, right, and it's just that dark side of tech that you can go on demand and have live stream abuse happen, and someone can pay for that. And it's horrifying. And so what happens, and what they did actually talk about, which I thought was at least, it's not the good news, but it sheds light as to why some people might do this behavior. And so, the woman that was arrested was living, like I said, in very rural Vietnam, and there was very limited access to resources, and really found a way via the internet to be able to make money to support herself. And to say it like that kind of makes it seem like, oh, this is no big deal. It's obviously really horrible. Some of the places where the woman was offering these services were chat platforms as some education, Bigo Live, Buzzcast, WhatsApp, and she was making these made-to-order videos for customers, and it came out because it was a man in Utah that got arrested, or sort of brought this to their attention, as to how they kind of got over to Vietnam and figured out what was going, and was able to were able to actually go in and rescue the little girl, or the girl, from the abusive situation. So that's the good news part of it. And the gentleman in Utah paid $550 to her, and for a video of sexual abuse. One thing I didn't realize that was quoted in this article from the U.S. Homeland Security is that the number one offending country for doing this, for going online and requesting either bespoke child sexual abuse or live stream child sexual abuse, is the United States. So the United States is the number one purchaser of this type of material, which is ghastly. And I'm not really sure what that says about us as a country, but that's probably something for a different conversation. So it was great in terms of the fact that they were able to find out who this woman and child were. They were able to go in and work in coordination with the law enforcement in Vietnam and remove the child from this abusive situation, and they said that it was the first successful rescue attempt in Vietnam to be able to rescue a child from this situation. And it was also the first time that the Vietnamese officials were able to successfully investigate such a case. And so again, that is an amazing piece of news, is that they were able to rescue the child from this. Again, once the CSAM is out there, it becomes very difficult to remove that, but at least they were able to get a child and get her safe. But the other piece about this, obviously, is, like I said, when people are like, well, how could a parent ever possibly do that for their child? And not that this makes it okay, but if someone like this mother is such a destitute situation, and the only thing that she saw, clearly distorted as a means to be able to, to make some money, was to sexually abuse her child. And obviously that is not appropriate and not okay. And also the internet is creating an avenue, right? It's creating this a revenue stream for people to be able to do this. So horrible news, good news, right? It's horrible news that this is out there. It's horrible news that you can just go on these sites and purchase bespoke live stream child sexual abuse. It's horrible that people are living in such abject poverty that they feel that this is their only way out. But the good news at the end of the story is that they were able to rescue the child. The next article, and this is a very brief article, so it'll be a very brief discussion, is that Denmark is taking legal action to try to ban the use of deep fakes for online imagery. And basically, they're trying to bring, I'd say, law up to date with technology. And obviously there's a concern with AI that people are creating deepfake sexual images, not just of celebrities, but of, people in general. There's apps like Nudify where you can take someone's picture and just make them naked. So they are trying to enact some legislation to create a safeguard against the spread of misinformation is part of it, but also deep fake imagery. So while they're not specifically talking about deep fake pornography, this is part of what's going on. And so they're talking about all forms of deep fake. So just pictures, videos, but also audio, because again, AI has made it very easy for them to kind of, people to take someone's voice and create audio that perhaps they did not say or do. And so again, it's not specifically talking about pornography issues, but that is one area where AI is used to make deep fakes. And so they're trying to make some legal action, which is always good news. The next article is about a piece from Vice magazine, online magazine, talking about AI contributing to the rise of sextortion. And I think in my world, we see a lot of sextortion both for young people, as well as folks who get caught up in that from social media content. And the article is just really discussing how it's really hard, particularly for young people on dating apps or on social media, to know, is it a bot that I'm talking to? Is it a real person that I'm talking to? And these AI chat bots are, being used more and more prolifically. And they kind of get in with the child or with the person. There ends up usually being some kind of sexual or revealing picture or video that's shared, and then that is used to extort the person, usually for money, like gift cards, things like that. And so they're extorting, right? Like people who are looking for connection, people who are looking for relationships, then threaten them to send it to their loved ones. And AI is really bumping up how that is used and making it easier for folks who are engaging in sextortion, because you no longer have to be, kind of like a live person doing it. You can just set up an AI chatbot, and it's adding to the problem. I think this article is actually kind of interesting. More AI, right? More tech, but also kind of looking at like what is cheating, which we see, with folks who are maybe looking at pornography, or maybe they're, chatting with somebody on Instagram or TikTok. And the question for some people arises, like, if you're in a relationship, is that cheating? And that obviously depends on everyone's beliefs, moral values, etc. But now we have the rise of, AI and AI data in, chat apps and things like that. And the question becomes like, hey, is that cheating? And so now in 2025, we have AI companions, right? People are starting to use them. This article talks about some of the AI dating apps out there: Replica, Anima, and a newly released Meo, M-E-O, that was launched during London Tech Week. And these are basically like AI chat programs or chat bots that are offering emotional and romantic companionship to people. And the article says they can simulate jealousy, flirtation, emotional support. And so if you're in a relationship and your partner is using that, the question then becomes, is that infidelity or is that fidelity? And I mean, I think it's just, there's no answer, obviously, because it's a very personal thing. But I thought it was interesting that, they warn that concept of fidelity is quietly evolving, right? So, they talk about 37% of Gen Z use Chat GPT to deal with loneliness. In the UK, a survey found that 16% of singles have quote unquote dated an AI companion. And this new app, Meo, is an AI girlfriend app that you can customize emotional traits like loyalty and flirtation. So as the use of AI increases and the use of these, chatbots increase, we're going to have to start to be thinking about, like, can you get emotionally attached to code, right? To an AI companion. And if you're in a relationship with a live human, what does that mean for your fidelity? Or how does your partner feel about you doing that? The last thing I wanted to talk about today, and I'm a day off from weekend news technically, but was one of the Supreme Court decisions. I know they came down and handed a bunch of decisions in the last few days, but this one particularly speaks to the age verification laws for pornography use. So the Texas law is the one that was up in the Supreme Court, even though there's other states that have enacted such laws. And fundamentally, the law that was in question was out of the state of Texas, and it required websites that host pornographic material, think Pornhub, right? Everybody who looks at porn uses Pornhub or one of their other sites. So that if you're hosting that pornographic material, the person who's hosting that, has to verify the age of the users. The hope is to stop young people under the age of 18 from going on those sites. And in order to verify ID, that the age, they'd have to supply a government issued ID or a third party age verification service. The law in Texas carries a fine of up to $10,000 per violation. That would be fined against the website, not the person, and it could be raised up to $250,000 per violation if they are found that minors are accessing that site. So, the Texas law argued that they need to do this for the safety of children. Children under the age of 18 should not be looking at pornography, which, that's not wrong. That's a very valid point, is that young people with undeveloped brains watching pornography is usually not a great idea for them. They argued that the technology has improved, that the platforms like Pornhub should be able to verify that. And so obviously there was a challenge to that made that went up to the Supreme Court. Lots of folks struggle with that concept, right? Folks who would like, so some folks will say that age verification, it's part of an anti-sex political movement. There's also folks who advocate for digital privacy, right, and free speech, that if you're limiting this access to pornography, you're limiting free speech. If you're requiring someone to provide a government access ID, you're violating their privacy. So some of those are the folks that really were against this, and was part of how this ended up at the Supreme Court. And so those opposed say the age verification requirements still raise serious privacy and free expression concerns. The Supreme Court did side with the state of Texas, and upheld that ability to say that, hey, you have to age verify if you're going to be showing pornographic material in the state of Texas.